Hi, everybody. Well, it's past midnight here, but we have to take our moments when they present themselves. We are working on the second sort of series in A Treatise on White Magic. One series already exists, about 50 programs. You can find that on makara.us. And that's the introduction and the rules for the mental plane. Now we're doing the rules for the astral plane, rules of magic for the astral plane. And this is our 12th video commentary. And we're about on page 250 or so. And we're dealing with Rule 8, and this is the 6th program in that series. On the eighth rule, a very important one, Master DK tells us. We've been looking at the dangers of psychism and how it's possible to, as it were, jump off into the world of astral phenomena, and it runs the risk of producing death by drowning. Of course, it's a kind of a spiritual consciousness death, or death of spiritual consciousness. It will be swamped, the spiritual life will be swamped and entirely submerged in the interests of the lower psychical experiences in which so many psychics tend to believe implicitly. So if they've experienced some sort of thought form or some sort of living presentation, they assume that it's true just because it's actual. Yes, it happened on that level. But whether or not it's true, well, that has to be tested in various ways, and so often it is not. So, death by drowning. A clue to the significance of these words is to be found in the recognition of the following occult fact. The place where water and land meet is the solar plexus nature. The place where water, land, and air meet is in the head. And this, I think, I've been emphasizing as we go along. Air is the symbol not only of the Buddhic plane, but on a lower turn of the spiral, it's the symbol of the systemic etheric body. Land is the symbol, he says, of the physical plane life and of the exoteric form. Notice how much of these rules may be put in symbolic terms, perhaps to guard them, let us say, and also perhaps to reveal certain things that can be revealed to those who are ready for them and concealed from those who are not. So land is the symbol of the physical plane life and of the exoteric form. Water is the symbol of the emotional nature. It is from the great center of the personality life, the solar plexus center, that the life is usually ruled and government administered. At least, let us say that is the case for so many human beings, maybe 80% at this time. I offer a speculation, only a speculation, that may be the case. When the center of, so many of us are directed in what we do by promptings which come from the lower nature, the lower aspect of the personality below the diaphragm. The solar plexus is one of those centers below the diaphragm. When the center of direction lies below the diaphragm, there is no magic possible. The animal soul controls animal consciousness, and the spiritual soul is perforce quiescent. Let's just say, for sure, no white magic is possible. Maybe certain psychic effects are possible. But these should not be called, quote, magic. Okay. The animal soul controls, that is the kind of consciousness which is found within the lower vehicles, because below the diaphragm, ruled by Mars, man is very much the animal. Interestingly, even until his third initiation and passing that, he's considered to be the animal. Mars is still very powerful. Mars rules the entire animal nature, and it is the sort of contest between the ruler of the animal kingdom in general, which is ruled by Mars, and then the ruler of the human kingdom, maybe which is more Mercury, Venus, that is controlling so much of the conflict in humanity's life. So anyway, the spiritual soul, which is the consciousness which exists within the causal body and beyond, including into the spiritual triad, is perforce quiescent. Why perforce? Because it is subdued by the animal soul. Just the way glamour prevents the realization of truth. The psychic phenomena rule out the true apprehension of the intuition, and here the animal soul subdues the higher type of human soul. The animal soul controls. Now, for people of our type, maybe that happens now and then in some kind of lapse or other, but in general it's not so. The human soul is at least operative, and hopefully the spiritual soul is coming into greater and greater power. Air is the symbol of the higher life in which the Christ principle dominates. Okay, let's call this is the Buddhic plane, in which freedom is experienced. Freedom from what? Even the causal body, and the soul comes into full expression. Let's just say even freedom from the causal body, and the real soul or ego is the spiritual triad, and when it is unsheathed and removed from the egoic lotus, then it experiences really full expression around the time of the fourth initiation. But of course, consciousness continues to grow, and the monad has consciousness, the monad has awareness, and on the veils are lifted, and we experience ever wider and deeper sensitivity, consciousness, etc. If you hear something in the background, I'm experimenting here. I'm not exactly the fifth rate type, but here in the Temple of Silence, we have periodically fountains, and we have a couple of new fountains, and I put it together. For me, a great achievement. I'm not the type, but I'm just waiting for it to explode. It seems to be operating pretty well, and will provide a certain background of the sound of water, which is often very restful. So anyway, air, it is the symbol of the Buddhic plane, as water is of the emotional. I think sometimes when intuitions are received but not understood, they can whip the emotional body into quite a state of turbulence, whitecaps and all. When the life of the personality is carried up into heaven, and the life of the soul comes down to earth, there is the place of meeting, and there the work of transcendental magic becomes possible. Now, that word transcendental, the word transcendental suggests the Buddhic plane. Transcen. Okay, there it is. Now, Mercury, the ruler or one ruler of the Buddhic plane, is called, when it relates to Buddhi, transcendental mind. Now that's not, exactly spiritual mind, let's say. It's not exactly soul mind or higher mind. It is something that really transcends those, although maybe there's another, well, there are many states of mind, but even on the cosmic physical plane, there's still a higher state of mind, a kind of atmic state of mind, a nirvanic state of mind, which it can be assumed the Buddha experienced and expressed. Okay, now let's see what else. The meeting place is the place of fire, the plane of mind. The meeting place, what place is that? Let's see, when personality ascends and, what should we say, the life of the soul descends. All right, the plane of mind, the plane of fire. So now we have definitely the association of fire and mind. There is here a definite association of fire and mind. Fire is the symbol of the intellect, and all magical work is an intelligent process. Well, let's just say, all real magical work. It's certainly possible people do spout mumbo jumbo, They get a hold of a mantra and they start repeating it, and it's kind of a mindless repetition. It may have some effects, and maybe not good ones. Maybe the mind or intellect doesn't know anything about it, but that's not the real magic. So fire is a symbol of the intellect with all of its many properties. When I was taking a course in psychological testing, I can't remember the Frenchman's name, but was it Piaget? I can't remember. It was long ago, 40 years ago or more. He identified some 120 plus faculties of the mind. So maybe, it'd be worth getting into those at some point, but we do know that it compares, it analyzes, it synthesizes, it reasons, it does a number of things that are fairly straightforward. That is the normal concrete intelligence. So fire is the symbol of the intellect, although Sagittarius, let's say a fire sign, is one of the intuitive signs, and fire rules, associated with the great fire god Agni, who is operative on the cosmic physical plane, but also stands in a way for the personality of the solar logos, and who knows how far that goes. Agni, can have to do with the cosmic mental and beyond, so we just don't know. But right now, we keep it in the area of the human capacities. It is the symbol of the intellect, and all magical work is an intelligent process carried out in the strength of the soul and by the use of the mind. Again, if it's in the strength of the soul, we are talking about white magic. We're told that in the coming age, there will be strictly mental magicians. They will not have soul contact, really, and they will be working very much for the satisfaction of their own personal desires. And that we who work in the field of white magic, or at least are learning to do so, must be able to counter that tendency, because it could be very dangerous when you look at the combination of the seventh and fifth ray. Already they're sort of fooling around with the attempt to possibly violate certain laws of genetics and to make combinations of animals and humans and things like that. Takes us back to the Atlantean days, I think, when that kind of experimentation went on, maybe under a fifth ray, which was unregulated, and it could be very dangerous. We sometimes see movies about that kind of thing, and the God of our planet has ordained certain regulations, and certain mixtures are just not allowed. If you mate the donkey and the horse, you get a mule. It's infertile. Okay, doesn't seem too bad. You mate the lion and the tiger, they're pretty close, and you get a liger or something like that. There are certain crossings which seem to occur in nature, perhaps, or maybe the human being is responsible for them. They don't seem too nefarious, but it's really possible for experimenters to create some sort of race of minimum intelligence and maximum brute force, with the object in mind of producing slave labor, all kinds of unpleasant thoughts there, and there's no belief in the divine plan or divine purpose to regulate such experimentation. So we have to be on the lookout, as the tendency to manipulate matter for personal or selfish ends gains in its efficiency. And what will stop it? What will stop it? Maybe the presence of the Christ, the presence of the hierarchy, and the demonstration of what is a real goal of humanity. Okay, anyway, carried out in the strength of the soul and by the use of the mind. To make itself felt on the physical plane, a brain is required which is receptive to higher impulses, the brain of the white magician, and which can be impressed by the soul utilizing the chitta, chitta, or mental substance in order to create the needed thought forms and so express the ideas and purposes of the intelligent, loving soul. All of this is very much the method. This is the method of white magic. From soul to mind and to brain and to hands, So the method. We'll have so many instances of having to somehow prove that there is a plan and there is a purpose and there are higher intelligences and they are hierarchicalized and there is a hierarchy. I assert the fact there is a hierarchy and there's a head of a hierarchy and there is Sanat Kumara and a planetary logos. All these things. These assertions will have to be backed up by that which convinces the intelligent. So anyway, the brain is required to receive the higher impulses. And do we have the mind held steady in the light? If we do, then our actions are along the line of white magic. And when we start to use the particular mantrams, controlling particular types of lives, then we're into the technical part of white magic. These are recognized by the brain, these thought forms, these ideas, purposes, and are photographed upon the vital airs found in the brain cavity. Now, this is an important hint about inner anatomy, physiology. So the photograph of the design of the plan, or even or more purpose. When these vital airs can be sensed by the magician in meditation, and the thought forms imprinted on this miniature reflection of the astral light, probably from the astral body, then the real potency of magic can begin to make itself felt. I saw a demonstration by a Japanese boy who impressed film with his thought, and interesting. The film held the image, and it came from what he thought. So, if he can do that, then certainly the vital airs can be impressed. Okay, I have this strange kind of thing here that goes on for me, and I'm just hoping that I've got it right. Here's some white magic. Okay. Yep, that's working. The brain has heard occultly the injunctions and instructions of the mind as it relays the behests of the soul. Those words of the soul. As the mind repeats the word, it relates also to the word of death. And then the soul can stand free because the form is released. But the word comes from the soul first, and then the mind repeats that word. I guess the proper thing to do, since I'm mentioning it, is to go to mind repeats word. I guess that's it right there. And it appears to be the law number 10, hearken, O Chela, to the call which comes from the son to the mother, from the soul to the form, and then obey. The word goes forth that form has served its purpose. The principle of mind, A.B. throws in, is the fifth principle, then organizes itself, and then repeats the word. The waiting form responds and drops away. The soul stands free. That's the first part of Law 10. Okay, so anyway, the brain has heard occultly the injunctions and instructions of the mind as it realizes the behests of the soul. The vital airs are swept into form-making activity, just as their higher correspondents, the modifications of the thinking principle, the mind stuff, as Patanjali calls it, are thrown into an analogous form-making activity. So the etheric area, I suppose, within the head and around the pineal gland, and involving the reception of image and word, are thrown into activity in reflection. This reflects what is happening in the mind. Okay. So these are the technical kinds of things, and obviously we have to be pretty clear about the image, don't we? I'm recalling some of this work from the Finnish epic, the Kalevala. This is full of occult hints, and there's apparently a whirlpool in the head, and when the magician can control the whirlpool, the connection between the brain and the astral plane will be uninterrupted, because otherwise this whirlpool scrambles the impressions and no memories come through. Okay, so anyway, the mind stuff has an analogous activity and a higher activity, really. These can then be seen interiorly by the man who is seeking to perform the magical work, and much of his success is dependent upon his ability to register impressions exactly and to see with clarity the forms of the process in magic which he is seeking to demonstrate as magical work in the outer world. So coherence of vision and accurate reception are vitally necessary, and this requires some calmness and firmness and control of the modifications of the versatile psychic nature, as Patanjali would call it, modifications, right? So anyway, we have to bring through, the soul will probably provide the image, it will be reflected upon the mind, which will be reflected upon the vital airs of the brain, and will transfer itself then via these ethers into the possibility of outer dense physical plane expression. So, this is a very technical kind of process, and I think we can understand why we have to be so well trained to really be a white magician, and why it's so foolish to kind of rush in, fools rushing in and try to do things before we have our vehicles, our faculties really under control. It might be therefore said that there are 3 stages in the form-making process. So DK, great teacher that he is, he's going to review this for us, and we need it. First, the soul or spiritual man, centered in the soul consciousness and functioning in the secret place of the Most High, visualizes the work to be done, and the Most High is Sanat Kumara, but not in this instance. The Most High is here, the soul and the inner center of the soul may provide a standing place for those who can achieve it, the true initiate. And there is no white magic unless one is really an initiate. So, all right, this is not a sequential act, but the finished, completed work of magic is visioned by a process that does not involve the time element or spatial concepts at all. So this is coming from one who knows, and we have to experience this ourselves. Okay, so that's the first thing that happens, and let's just try to keep track here so we know where we're going. And secondly, all right, so this is first a soul act, right? Whoop. Everything is suddenly very small. All right. This is an act of the soul. The secret place of the Most High. Well, I have a feeling I want to call that calling this the jewel in the lotus. Visualizes the work to be done. Okay. It's the finished, completed work, which must manifest itself. The end, let's just say, is visioned. Let's just say this. The end is seen from the beginning. And when the planetary logos envisions what his creative demonstration will be, well, who knows in what detail it is visioned, probably from the purposeful angle. It is completely visioned as an archetype, but how we get there, given the principle of free will and so forth, maybe those methods are not all visioned, although within absolute infinitude they would have to be, but that's another matter, really virtually inconceivable to us. Secondly, the mind responds to the soul, calling attention to the work to be performed, and is swept into thought-making activity by this impression. The mind responds. Okay, so what have we got here? Let's do it that way. Spiritual soul visualizes the work to be done. Okay, the mind responds to the soul, calling attention within the mind to the work to be performed, and is swept into thought form making activity by this impression. In other words, how does it happen? You have to think sequentially, you have to use Saturn, you have to use Mercury, you have to, you're entering into time and space, and there have to be steps, linear. Even though in a Uranian fashion you may see the end from the beginning in a flash, in a moment, in time and space, there's a sequentiality that has to be followed. According to the lucidity and illumination of the mind stuff, so will be the response to the impression. Now, this is where illusion can enter in. Okay, right? This is where illusion and misinterpretation can enter in. So much of illusion is simply misinterpretation. The original source of impression can be high, but the mind is not ready. It's not, if the mind is not of a quality and luminosity to correctly interpret. If the mind, let's see here, if the mind is the true reflector and receiver of soul impressed, the corresponding thought form will be true to its prototype. So here we have the principle of congruence. This is really important, to be faithful to the original and originating impression. And there's so much opportunity for deviation, so that which originates on the higher planes may not really come through. If it is not true, as is usually the case in the early stages of the work, then the thought form created will be distorted and incorrect, unbalanced, and, using an old term, out of drawing. Now we have, CAD, computer-assisted design. We have tremendous computer facility in rendering what we might conceive either in the mind or from a higher source. But in those old days, unbalanced, incorrect, distorted, out of drawing, not faithful to the original design, right? Oh my goodness, this is such a, all right. I have a big file here, not faithful to the original design. It is in meditation that the work of accurate reception and correct building is learned, and hence the emphasis laid in all true schools of esoteric training upon a focused mind, a capacity to visualize, an ability to build thought forms, and an accurate grasp of egoic intent. Every time Master DK uses the word ego, well, pretty much, he doesn't use it in the modern psychological sense, meaning the lower personality. He simply calls personality the personality or the lower self. And ego, even if it has no capital E, is meant to relate to the higher mind, to the structures found on the higher mental plane. So, all of our occult training, our training in esotericism, is part of this preparation for accurate transmission of that which the soul knows. And remember, the soul knows the plan. We somehow, in combination, as extensions of the monad, in combinations with the projection of the solar angel, its presence, its mind into our causal body, we know something of the divine plan, and this has to be brought down. We know much more than we think within our personality mind that we know. Well, really, in the last analysis, we know everything in the universe, but that's a big stretch. It involves such an amazing change of perceived identity as we usually approach what I consider to be a fact here incredulously, like it just can't be true. Okay, hence, also the need of the magician beginning the practical work of magic with himself as the subject of the magical experiment. So, let's just put it like this. What would we say to such a magician? We say, magician, recreate thyself. Let's see those changes in our character, in our personality, in our vehicles. Let's see transmutation, transformation, transfiguration. That's a good place to start, and then once we're more successful at doing that and become a demonstration of what we think is good, then maybe we're ready to work in the larger picture successfully. He begins to grasp the vision of the spiritual man as he is in essence. That is, what can we say? Our higher nature begins to be seen. And usually, in the personality mind, we only suspect it exists and do not know much about its nature from first-hand experience. He realizes the virtues. They are, even in the causal body, many virtues are stored which perhaps do not yet manifest in any one life until, as we approach the third degree, maybe they start to. He realizes the virtues and reactions which the spiritual man would evidence in physical plane life. In other words, this means the beginning of living as a soul. It's one thing to, it's one thing to have these realizations. Yeah. Oh boy. It's it's one thing to have these realizations on higher planes. It's another to bring them right down, manifesting through the lower planes, through the physical, astral, mental, etc. He builds the thought form of himself as the ideal man, the true server, the perfect master. This is master in the heart, master in, master in the heart, no, meditation. Sometimes DK says, well, it all depends who you are. Oh, I'm having a little trouble here, and I'm going to have to try to do this, and I'm going to call this, let's see if I can really do this. Sorry for the Treatise on White Magic. Right. Let's see if this will work for me. Sorry for the little delay, but I'm having trouble, when the file gets perhaps too big, or the computer, as I suspect is the case, becomes overloaded, like my life. Okay. He builds the thought form of himself as the ideal man. And DK says, well, you can build the master in the heart, or you can build yourself. Maybe you're not the devotional type, okay? So you build an image of yourself as the ideal man, and you see that in the midst of your heart center. He builds the thought form of himself as the ideal man, the true server, the perfect master. He gradually coordinates his forces so that power to be these things in external reality begins to take shape, so that all men can see. Gradually we work towards the ideal image. We work towards making the ideal image real. He creates a pattern in his mind which hews as true as he can make it to the prototype, and which serves to model the lower man and force conformity to the ideal Notice this principle again. I would call it, principle of congruence, but he forces, principle of congruence. He forces the outer to conform to the inner. Now, if we have a good imagination, we can really shape things well. If we're inspired by the soul and we can see what we could be or would be, maybe we'll be more successful in forcing the outer man to be as the inner man is. As he perfects his techniques, he finds a transmuting, elevating matter and its vibration, transforming power at work, having to do more with the emotional plane and creating ideal forms which are properly related. As he perfects his technique, he finds a transmuting, transforming power at work upon the energies which constitute his lower nature, until all is subordinated and he becomes in practical manifestation what he is esoterically and essentially. Well, it's work, right? It's difficult and takes the factor of time, which seems real, even if it ultimately is not. As this takes place, he begins to be interested in the magical work in which it is the function of all true souls to participate. So maybe, well, what can we say? That every member of hierarchy is a white magician. White magician, yeah. Every member of hierarchy is a white magician. He may not be technically working with the seventh ray in a specialized manner, but somehow, because of his very position within hierarchy and because he has subordinated the personality to the inner and higher man, he's able to externalize his true nature through the personality, and then whatever he touches, wherever he goes, he's able to find some kind of plan or archetype which is divinely intended and to which he can contribute successfully in terms of the externalization of that divine intent. Then the third aspect of form making can manifest. Well, so far, I guess we've been through the soul and we've been through the mind. Okay, so far, soul and mind have been discussed. The brain is synchronized with the mind, and the mind with the soul. Synchronization to make sure that whatever occurs is not out of drawing, as it were, and the plan is sensed within the personality brain. The vital layers in the head can be modified and respond to the force of the building magical work, so that a true form reflecting the soul's intent is impressed upon these airs and can manifest. A thought form exists then as the result of the two previous activities, but it exists in the place of the brain activity and becomes a focus center for the soul, focusing center for the soul. The initiate focused within the soul can work through this place within the brain, and a point through which the energy can flow for the performance of the magical work. So we really do need that place where land, water, and air meet, and we really need the moment, the timing when they can meet, which, depends upon our process and how faithfully we follow that. All right, so this is the magic through and through: soul, mind, brain, and somewhat in this process, as we're reviewing it, skipping the astral body, but as we actually examine the white magical process, the astral body provides motivation, a certain charge, a certain urgency, a certain aspiration, a certain livingness, which is necessary to make sure that the mental form is not unpropelled, that the mental form is really motivated towards manifestation rather than just being another thing I thought, which is not coming into manifestation. So a thought form exists then as the result of the two previous activities. What does he mean? Of soul and mind, but it exists in the place of the brain activity and becomes a focusing center for the soul. So, can we get the sense of being focused within the soul, but still somehow working through this area within the light in the head, this etheric luminosity around the pineal gland or between the pituitary and pineal gland? Can we get the sense of working within the ethers of the head while we still remain focused within the soul? And a point through which energy can flow for the performance of the magical work. You see, wow, this is really technical stuff, and we don't want to just sort of, blunder in and say, okay, now I have a few words and a few images and a few mantrams. I'm just going to begin. Such caution, such seventh ray caution, step-by-step caution is needed in the area where we intend to work within our own etheric instrument, or through it anyway. The magical work carried out under the direction of the soul, inspiring the mind, which in its turn impresses the brain, leads as a result of this triple coordinated activity to the creation of a focusing center or form within the head of the magician. That's a wonderful summary, isn't it? That's a wonderful summary. And I'm going to read it again, after I make it a little bigger. This magical work carried out under the direction of the soul, and that, of course, is the key for white magical work, inspiring the mind, which in its turn impresses the brain, leads then as a result of this triple coordinated activity, hence the such important need for integration, this triple coordinated activity, to the creation of a focusing center or form within the head of the magician. And this is the work within the cave, as some people call it, within the light in the head, within that magnetic area, within the etheric area surrounding the etheric correspondence to the pineal gland. This is where the work is carried out. The energy which flows through this focal point acts through three distributing agents, and hence all three are active in the magical work. And now this is important. Okay, so now we go forward with the means of further distribution. The right eye, through which the vital energy of the spirit can express itself, not just the soul. Note the use of the word spirit, but as it works through the soul, I suspect. The throat center, through which the word, the second aspect, or soul, expresses itself. Right eye and throat center. This is a kind of a different triangle. The hands, through which the creative energy of the third aspect works. Now, normally you don't see the throat center. Normally the throat center is not associated with the second aspect of divinity. But okay, in this case it is. And the right eye, usually associated with the soul, left eye is of Manas, is in this case associated with the spirit. Well, ultimately, whatever comes through the soul really is engineered by the power of the spirit, and by its name and by its place and by its function within the divine will. Probably, our whole identity is not contained in the soul or in the jewel in the lotus, our greater identity, which will make us one day sort of a jewel in the crown of the planetary logos, if that is our fate, is found within the monad, the secret name, which we will become more in touch with as we learn our various groups and groupings and the various groups of which we are a part, climbing on the way to the 7 great circles one day of the monadic plane. So this is, let's call this kind of, an unusual triangle, not the one usually discussed, which would be like Ajna centered in the 2 eyes, perhaps, or the third eye and the other 2 eyes, or the centers before the eyes, or the head center above the head, or the Ajna center and the Alta Major center. These are more commonly discussed triangles. But here's one that is of interest. The energy which flows through this focal point acts as through 3 distributing agents. So, let's just say from the cave or area of the etheric brain. From the area of the etheric brain around the pineal gland. Through the right eye, through which the vital energy of spirit can express itself, through the throat center, through which the word, which is the sounding of the soul as it reflects the monad, through which the word, the second aspect of the soul, expresses itself, and through the hands. The hands of the white magician are very important, and one of the interesting things is that, well, sometimes magic is considered to be a 3rd ray expression, sometimes the 7th, with the 7th ray giving the attitude of the ritualist, but he tells us that when we have the 7th ray physical body, we have the tendency to work with our hands. And maybe that's why the 7th ray with the 4th ray, these are the 2 practically artistic rays. You do need the hand power, the handicraft, the power of the hand. The white magician works with the eyes open, the voice proclaiming, and the hands conferring, bestowing, giving, creating, making real, making manifest. So this is such a great statement and something upon which we can really ponder. The white magician works with the eyes open, even though in this particular triangle, one eye is emphasized, but each eye has several assignments. The right eye can be the astral body, can be the soul, it can be the spirit. The left eye can be the mind, it can be an aspect of the will, maybe it can be something even higher. So it's not just that each eye has only one association with one type of energy which can work through it. It all depends upon the elevation of the individual. These points are of technical interest to the experienced worker in magic, but of symbolic interest only to the aspirants for whom these letters are intended. That's how they went out, as lesson sets, and not yet as a complete book, but can we transform symbolic interest into practical, technical interest. Goodness, I guess I italicized everything up just about up to this point. You know, you have to kind of go through because this Alice Bailey CD-ROM will not transfer italics. So if you want to see what the Tibetan has actually emphasized, we have to go through it. And that's, you know, what I'm going to be doing as we move on. But I had to mark it, that the inner vision may be ours, and the eye see clearly the glory of the Lord. And, you know, and this, you know, we're not talking yet. We are not talking here of the synthetic third eye, but of the right eye, interestingly enough. And the voice speak only in benediction, and the hands be used only in helpfulness, may well be the prayer of each of us. I think, you know, Master DK, I don't know what his rays would be right now, but certainly he came up with a lot of the sixth ray. He had great zeal, as they say, and some stories are told of his great zeal and what it may have led to untoward events. Well, look, we're at Rule 9. There's really no point in going any further. We're just about at an hour. We have finished Rule 7. We've finished Rule 8. When I say finished, this is only the most cursory commentary, indicative maybe, and indicative of lines of inquiry that you yourself can follow. And in this incarnation and in incarnations to come, when perhaps you will be involved in the new esoteric schools and will have more time karmically granted for very deep research into these matters and for esoteric expression. I think, you know, you still have quite a bit of sixth ray and Pisces to clean up. It may be that there is this great conclave in 2025 and new aspects of the teaching will come forward, and that is very good, but we cannot assume that 2025 will be the moment that the Christ reappears, because he is the Aquarian Christ, and we have by no means accomplished the things which he will need, nor does it seem possible that in the next 7 years we will, in terms of world peace and sharing and the house cleaning, which is so badly needed. So basically, we'll be strengthened in 2025, I believe, and we will have a new teaching, and he calls it a bridging teaching. So that in itself shows you we are not solidly into the Aquarian age, and we will have much of the cleanup work to do with respect to the recrudescence of the sixth ray and certain Piscean factors. People who are affected very much by those energies will have some kind of last-ditch stand, you know, expressing these energies in which they fully believe and without which they think they cannot live significantly. So it could get quite intense, and even after 2025, but at least I think hierarchy can assess. Hopefully we'll have sufficient disciples in the field and the new teaching will help us, and we'll make that transition towards the real fading out of the sixth ray on the particular cycle on which it's demonstrating now, and the fading out of the Piscean energies mostly by the end of this 21st century, and I think pretty well by 21, 25, or maybe earlier, the sixth ray will fade out, and in the year 2117, DK has given some indications that the true age of Aquarius actually begins. untainted, uncontaminated, not held back by the retrogressive pull of the last vestiges of the Piscean sixth-ray civilization. All right, so I'll really have to pay attention to this. Whoa, you see, look at that. Look at that, how that works. It just tends to, I really have to do something about this. Anyway, this is the end of A Treatise on White Magic Video, commentary number 12. And it's page something or other, isn't it? Page 254, almost 255. We're starting page 254. And Rule 8, and it's going to be 8.6, and beginning of A Treatise on White Magic Video Commentary, number 13, and rules for the astral plane. Rule 9, we start, and we'll start with 9.1 is what it will be, and rules for the astral plane. All right, friends, that's it for the moment, and we have 3 more rules, and one of them is a really big one. Rule 10 is huge, okay, 150 pages or something like that. But anyway, we'll get on with rules 9, 10, and 11, and then 12, 13, 14, 15 will be the rules for the physical plane or etheric physical plane. Thank you for attending, and it's really hot here in Finland. You know, some of you, I think Melania Trump, she showed up with a coat even in the middle of summer here because she thought it was going to be so hot. Finland has that kind of reputation, but in the summer, let me tell you, we can fry here, and seem to be doing that at the moment. So, okay, lots of love, many blessings, study hard, and let's go forward. See you then.